Hi guys, it's Taylor and welcome back to my channel. So I know I announced that the Getting Hitched videos will be coming out soon. Unfortunately, due to me suffering from like the stomach flu from hell and starting a new job and trying to get acquainted to, working, basically all day, adult job, adulting, just doing adult things. That has kind of fallen by the wayside. It's not over. I am still actively working on it. Unfortunately, production has slowed down, but I have a lot of exciting things to sort of go for the first episode of Getting Hitched and in future episodes. However, I still want to bring more of the screen side of my name to you guys. So in lieu, except not really in lieu, so I guess to hold you off until I can actually get to Getting Hitched, I want to talk to you about my top 10 favorite movies. So let's not waste any time and let's get started talking about me. So these are going to go from my least favorite of the 10 to my most favorite of the 10. And please feel free to roast me in the comments down below or to compliment me on my fantastic taste in movies, preferably the latter. So let's get started. Number 10, we've got Psycho.
It's not as if she were a maniac, a raving thing. She just goes a little mad sometimes. We all go a little mad sometimes. Haven't you?
Yes. Sometimes just one time can be enough.
This is a film directed by Alfred Hitchcock, which, as you all know, I absolutely love. Oh, this is my sister's Norman Bates, but I keep him here for a lot of reasons. Yeah. So this is off the fly, so it's not like I have anything prepared to analyze this film, but I do want to talk about why I like it. I like Marion Crane, first of all. What a fantastic female lead. I like Norman Bates. I like this idea of sort of, I don't like the idea of violence being done towards women, but how hate towards women is dangerous. And it brings up sort of like certain things like slut shaming and just, how the hatred of women can be so basically dangerous. Obviously, it's hard to talk about Psycho because there is not a lot about Psycho that hasn't been said. There's the whole Oedipus theory stuff. There's the idea that the Bates home is like symbolic of Norman's brain with like the id, the ego, the super ego, stuff like that. But what I will say is that the acting is fantastic. The way it's filmed, the fact that it was filmed on like a television budget, the fact that the marketing for it was done so well, the fact that people still remember it today as one of the greatest films ever made, the fact that it was so new and inventive to the time that it was released, that's why I love it. It's just such a great movie, guys. Go watch it. At number 9, we've got Sense and Sensibility.
After all that is bewitching in the idea of one's happiness entirely depending on one person, it is not always possible, we must accept. Edward will marry Lucy, and you and I will go home.
Always resignation and acceptance. Always prudence and honor and duty. Eleanor, where is your heart?
This is a film directed by Ang Lee, and the screenplay was written by Emma Thompson. She also stars in it. It also stars Kate Winslet, Alec Baldwin, Hugh Grant, I think that's his name. And this film, fantastic. This is the movie that got me interested in Jane Austen. When you're like 13 or 14 years old, it's going to take a lot for you to pick up a book written in the 1800s and just read it. So I saw this movie first, fell in love with the story, and then read the book, and that's how I fell in love with Jane Austen. But this movie is done so well. If you don't know what it's about the story of two sisters, Eleanor and Marianne. When their father dies, all of the money reverts to their half-brother and his horrible wife. And they are left penniless because, they have no home, basically no money. The brother and his wife are greedy and they don't want to give any of their money away, which means that their marriage prospects are just gone, obliterated. And then they both meet men, and you kind of see how their different personalities both hinder and help them in terms of romance. Eleanor is very sensible, very practical. You know, she knows her station in life and she doesn't want to challenge it. And while that does help with her love interest, Edward Ferrars, he definitely falls for that sort of pragmatism. It does sort of hinder her because she is so sensible that sometimes she can't, she can't really confess her feelings and really actively pursue what she wants out of love. Marianne, why can't I say Marianne? Marianne, on the other hand, is a free spirit. She falls in love with this man named Willoughby, and she basically gives her all to him. She acts wildly in love in public. She holds nothing back, and because of that, she doesn't know how to act with what's according to the time. You're supposed to be more reserved. You aren't supposed to give your all to someone, which I still think is good advice now. You probably shouldn't just depend on one single person all the time. And this book is a very good example of why you need to sort of meet in the middle on this. And the film, I think, really portrays both of the sisters well. I like that they aged up Eleanor. I think that was a risky decision that definitely paid off in the end. So yeah, the film is beautiful. It's funny. I think out of all the Jane Austen adaptations, this is the one Jane Austen would like the most. That and the Lizzie Bennet Diaries. Number 8, we've got Lady Bird.
I want to go where culture is, like
How
New
in the
York,
world did I raise such a
or at least
snob?
Connecticut or New Hampshire, where writers live in the
Get
woods.
into those schools anyway.
Mom,
You can't even pass your driver's test.
because you wouldn't let me practice
The way
enough.
that you work, or the way that you don't work, you're not even worth state tuition, Christine.
My name is Lady Bird.
Well, actually, it's not, and it's ridiculous.
Call me
because your
Lady
name
Bird
is
like
Christine.
you said you would.
You should just go to City College. With your work ethic, just go to City College and then to jail, and then back to City College, and then maybe you'd learn to pull yourself up and not expect everybody to do everything.
This is a film directed by Greta Gerwig, and it got a lot of Oscar buzz like a few years back, and it deserves all of it. Someone referred to it, like one critic referred to it as a flawless film, and while I do hold that there is no such thing as a flawless film, I have not found a single flaw in this movie. It is fantastic. Greta Gerwig really sort of properly conveys the sometimes fraught relationship between mothers and daughters, especially during such a turbulent time when Lady Bird wants to be independent and her mother wants her to be practical and stay close to her. It is really good, and I love seeing how Lady Bird and her mother are basically two sides of the same coin, and that's represented so beautifully in the beginning shot, or like the opening shot of the film. It's funny, it's sometimes insane, it makes you nostalgic, but also you sort of miss those times when you were as innocent and free as Lady Bird. But if you're an adult watching it as an adult, sometimes you're like, oh, honey, don't do that. You sort of take the side of the mom. Number 7 is a bit of a cheat, and that is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 and 2.
All available guards in full combat gear.
So these movies mean a lot to me. I love superhero movies, but up until Guardians of the Galaxy, I don't think I ever would have considered putting one on my favorite movies list. These films deserve it. I like the idea of morally ambiguous misfits finding a family in each other. Society won't accept them for who they are, probably because they're terrible, but they find each other and they end up doing some good. This film, like, the acting is stellar. I love the dynamics between all of the characters, and I know I cheated by saying Volume 1 and 2, but I think they both complement each other really well. I know a lot of people don't like Volume 2 as much as they like Volume 1, but I would like to say Volume 2 really grows and expands the characters in a way that I think is appropriate. I think it would be weird if all of the Guardians films after the first one had the exact same tone without really growing the characters and taking on a more serious note. Because these characters, with the exception of maybe Zoe Saldana's character Gamora, are children, basically, and they all need to grow up. And growing up sometimes means leaving that sort of goofy, fun-loving side in the past. these movies are great. They're funny. They took me by surprise. Who would have ever thought that a movie with a talking raccoon and a giant space tree would be on my favorites list? But here we are. Number 6, we've got Rear Window.
You could see all that he did, couldn't you?
Of course.
You could see because the shades were up, and he walked along the corridor in the street in the backyard.
The backyard fixing the flowers.
Jeff, do you think a murderer would let you see all that? That he wouldn't pull the shades down and hide behind them?
Just where he's being clever, he's being nonchalant.
Oh, and that's where you're not being
He's
clever.
just being
A
nonchalant.
murderer would never parade his crime in front of an open window.
Why not?
Why, for all you know, there's probably something a lot more sinister going on behind those windows.
Where? Oh. No comment.
This is another Alfred Hitchcock film. Love it. Rear Window might have been first if a bunch of other films hadn't come and basically taken its spot. It's a thriller. It was in the 1950s. It stars Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly, and Thelma Ritter, I think, plays his sort of nurse. But it's about a story of a man who breaks his leg, and because it's 1950 and the American Disabilities Act hasn't really been passed, his building doesn't have an elevator. So he's basically confined to his home, and the only thing he can do all day is look out his window and watch all of his neighbors. And one day, he believes he's witnessed one of his neighbors murder his wife. Now, Jimmy Stewart's character is on the case to try and prove that his neighbor is a murderer. He's joined by his middle-aged nurse and Grace Kelly, his girlfriend. And what I love about this movie is that it features two very strong, proactive women. I think it's interesting, though, how Alfred Hitchcock had to literally break the leg of the male character to get the two females to do some sort of action-y stunts. There's this great scene where Grace Kelly scales the wall in a frilly dress and heels, and it's fantastic. Jimmy Stewart's character is a jerk, and he doesn't deserve Grace Kelly, but I think the film has this really good way of having them come together while they're trying to solve this murder mystery. I do also like that Grace Kelly's character is a career woman. She's a supermodel and maybe an editor. It's not too clear on that, but she has her own career and she knows what she wants. And poor Jimmy Stewart's character is so, like, his masculinity is so fragile. He can't handle that she makes more money than him. So I'm not saying he's a rose, but it's still a really good movie, and Alfred Hitchcock really does thrillers well. And I do like this sort of voyeuristic take on films. It's a great film, and if you ever have the chance, please, please, please watch it.